I think a lot of people become emotionally attached long before they become emotionally safe. And that changes the way they experience love completely. Because once someone gains emotional importance in your life, small things stops feeling so small. A delayed reply feels personal. A dry message feels like distance. A small change in energy feels like the beginning of losing them. And I think that level of emotional intensity means that the connection must be special. Like, but sometimes it means your nervous system is panicking. It's something I didn't understand for a long time. Like, I used to think if someone could affect my mood that much, if they stayed on my mind constantly, if I cared so deeply about whenever they chose me or not, then it had to be love. Because why else would someone have that much power over you? But now I think that a lot of people, what they call love, is actually emotional dependence mixed with fear. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being replaced. Fear of watching someone slowly lose interest while you're still becoming more attached. And once fear enters a relationship, your brain stops enjoying the connection naturally. It starts monitoring everything. You begin noticing tiny changes nobody else would. You become hyper aware of tone, timing, attention, and affection. You start measuring love instead of feeling it, and that's exhausting. Because no amount of reassurance permanently fixes insecurity when insecurity already existed before the relationship. That's why overthinking becomes addictive. Because every little moment starts feeling meaningful. If they reply quickly, you feel safe. If they seem distant, your whole mood changes. Your emotional state becomes connected to their behavior, and that's dangerous. Because eventually you stop having emotional stability on your own. You become emotionally dependent on consistency from another person. And humans are inconsistent naturally. People get tired, busy, distracted, quiet. But when you're attached through insecurity, normal human behavior starts feeling threatening. That's why emotionally insecure attachment feels so painful. Not because relationships are always bad, because your brain turns uncertainty into danger. And once someone becomes your emotional source of validation, you stop seeking them clearly. You stop asking yourself if they're healthy for you. You stop asking whether they're actually bringing peace into your life. You only focus on whatever they still want for you. Like, that's where people lose themselves. Because love becomes less about connection and more about avoiding abandonment. And I think that's why emotionally distant people become so addictive. They create inconsistency, and inconsistency creates obsession. Your brain starts chasing the high moments, the reassurance, the affection, the times they suddenly make you feel special again. And when affection feels unpredictable, it becomes more emotionally powerful. And that's basic human psychology. People value what feels uncertain, especially insecure people. Because uncertain love feels like something you need to earn. And once you believe love must be earned, you stop believing you deserve calm love naturally. That's why healthy relationships can actually feel strange to people who are used to emotional chaos. Because healthy love feels consistent. It doesn't trigger panic. It doesn't make you question your worth every night. It doesn't disappear and return just enough to keep you attached. But when someone spent years associating anxiety with attraction, peace can accidentally feel boring. That's one of the saddest things about modern relationships, especially with teenagers. A lot of people don't know the difference between emotional excitement and emotional instability anymore, and social media made it worse. People romanticize confusion constantly. They romanticize mixed signals. They romanticize chasing emotionally unavailable people. They romanticize never fully knowing where they stand, like uncertainty somehow makes you love deeper. But I don't think real love consistency leaves you for emotional starving. I think real love feels emotionally safe enough that your mind finally gets to rest. And if someone has never experienced emotional safety before, that kind of calmness can actually feel unfamiliar at first. That's why some people leave healthy relationships to return to emotionally chaotic ones. Not because the healthy person lacked value, because chaos felt more emotionally stimulating. And humans get addicted to emotional stimulation very easily, especially when self-worth is low. Because if you secretly believe you're hard to love, you'll naturally chase people who make love feel difficult. Difficulty feels familiar, and familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar pain. That realization changed the way I viewed relationships completely. Because I started understanding that wanting someone intensely doesn't always mean they're right for you. Sometimes it just means they're activated your deepest insecurities. And insecurity can intimate love very convincingly. Like, I used to think love was supposed to feel intense all the time. Like if someone made your stomach drop every time they texted. If they stayed awake and you stayed awake just overthinking about them. If you had the power to ruin your whole mood with one dry reply. Then that must mean feelings were real. But now I think a lot of that was anxiety. When someone truly liked you in a healthy way, most of the time they don't leave you constantly guessing. They don't make you question wherever you stand at night. They don't disappear just enough to make you chase harder. But the problem is, when you're used to inconsistency, peace can actually feel unfamiliar. And people confuse unfamiliarity with boredom all the time. That's why some people lose interest the second someone starts loving them properly. Because they were never addicted to love, they were addicted to uncertainty. They were addicted to trying to earn love. There's something dangerous about finally getting attention from someone emotionally distant. It feels rewarding, like you've accomplished something, like you've finally become enough. And I think that's why emotionally unavailable people stay in people's heads for so long. Not because the relationship was deep, but because the validation felt difficult to obtain. People value what feels hard to keep, even when it destroys them. I think attachment and love are two completely different things. Attachment says, please don't leave me. Love says, I care about you even when I'm not afraid. Attachment comes from fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of loneliness, fear of not being enough. That's why attachment can feel so intense. Because your nervous system treats losing the person like losing safety. And when someone becomes your source of validation, you stop seeking them clearly. Never make a woman your main source of happiness if you're not dating them either. Like, you stop asking, did they actually treat me well? And start asking, how do I keep them interested? That's not peace. That's survival. And I think a lot of people stay in unhealthy emotional situations because the highs feel so powerful. But powerful emotions are not always healthy emotions. Chaos can feel exciting. Consistency can feel boring. But excitement is not the same thing as emotional safety. And that's where I think realization changes how you see the relationships forever. I'm going to tell you a little story from my own experience because I think this is where I understood the difference properly. There was someone I liked a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean the kind of person who slowly becomes part of your routine before you even realize it. The person you check for, the person who you could change your mood for instantly. And at the start, everything felt amazing. Not because the relationship was perfect, because it felt unpredictable. Sometimes she'd give me so much attention. Sometimes she'd go distant. Sometimes she'd make me feel like I'm the only person she cared about. Other times I'd feel completely invisible. And instead of walking away from that inconsistency, I became more attached to it without even realizing. because every small moment of affection started feeling valuable, like something I had to earn, and eventually I realized I stopped enjoying the connection itself. I started obsessing over maintaining it. That changes you. You become hyper aware. You notice energy shifts instantly. You notice that a late reply affects your whole night. One dry text feels personal. One cancelled plan feels like rejection. And after enough time, you stop feeling secure even during the good moments. Because part of you was already preparing for the distance to come back. That's not love. That's emotional instability disguised as passion. And the sad part is, when someone finally likes you consistently after that, it almost feels wrong. Because healthy attention doesn't create adrenaline. Peace feels quieter. And because people who grew attached to chaos sometimes mistake peace for lack of feelings. I think one of the saddest things people do is ignore the people who would actually love them properly. Not because they're bad people, because stable love feels less emotionally intense. The person reassures you constantly, who communicates clearly, who doesn't leave you confused, can actually feel less exciting than the person who keeps you questioning everything. And that says a lot about modern relationships. People are so used to emotional inconsistency that healthy love can almost feel unnatural. Some people don't want peace, not intentionally. But subconsciously, they crave the emotional highs and lows because it keeps the relationship feeling dramatic and alive. And I think social media has made this even worse. People romanticize toxic emotional dynamics constantly. The chasing, the jealousy, the mixed signals, the emotional distance, the micro-cheating. But real love usually looks much quieter than that. Real love often looks safe, and safety doesn't always create adrenaline, but it creates stability. And stability is what actually lasts. I think the hardest realization is understanding that wanting someone deeply doesn't automatically mean they're right for you. Sometimes you only want them because they've activated every insecurity you already have. Sometimes they become emotionally important because they were inconsistent, because your brain kept chasing closure, kept chasing certainty, kept chasing reassurance, and as stupid as it sounds, it's probably true. And eventually you become attached to the pursuit itself. That's why people struggle to let go of situations they barely even came relationships, because unfinished emotions stay louder in the mind. And people don't just grieve reality, they grieve potential, the future they imagined, the version of the relationship they hoped would eventually exist. That's what makes it painful. Not just the person, losing the possibility. I think real love feels different than people expect. It's not empty, it's not boring, it's not emotionless, just calmer, more secure. Less focused on fear, because if someone genuinely loves you, you usually wouldn't spend every night trying to decode wherever they care. You won't feel like affection is something you constantly need to earn. You won't feel emotional starved all the time. And maybe that's the difference people need to understand. Wanting someone intensely doesn't always mean you love them deeply. Sometimes it just means they triggered every wound you had. And maybe the right person isn't the one who gives you the strongest butterflies. Maybe it's the person who makes your mind finally go quiet. Because love probably isn't supposed to feel like surviving uncertainty each day. And I think a lot of people confuse emotional chaos with connection, when really the healthiest relationships are the ones that feel safe enough to stop performing inside. Maybe the right person isn't the one who keeps chasing you. Maybe it's the one who never makes you feel like you have to.